Hi, I'm Jacie Bandur on the Learning and Development team at GitLab, and I'm joined by Eric Johnson, GitLab CTO, and Samantha Lee, also on the Learning and Development team. Today, during this handbook learning session, we're going to be talking about career development. So Eric, can you start by sharing what your own career path has looked like to date?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a startup person. GitLab's my fifth startup. So I've worked for four previous companies. I didn't get the 4-year comp sci degree like a lot of engineers did. I got a philosophy degree. So I was coding on my own, kind of self-taught, but got into the technology industry and started entry level, rock bottom. I think my first salary was $35,000 a year, and I negotiated them up to 36 based on nothing but, I guess, confidence. And I thought that was a lot at the time. So I've literally spanned the whole breadth of what you can do in a career, starting from the absolute rock bottom. I've been fortunate. So I'm at that first company. I started as a developer. Then I was promoted to a technology manager and then a senior technology manager. I made the hop to director by moving to my second company, although honestly, in retrospect, it was probably director in title only, and the role was much more akin to what I was doing before. I think I got a raise there, but didn't get an official promotion, and that was just about 2 years in that company. That startup went out of business, got acquired. Then at my third company, I was there 6 years. I started as I did the opposite. I took a downgrade in title to get into this company. I was a group manager, and then was promoted to director, and then eventually senior director over about 6 years. And then at my fourth company, made a lateral move, but went from a public company back to a startup. Started as a director, was eventually promoted to VP of engineering, and so was over the whole breadth of engineering. And then made the hop to GitLab, where I started as VP of engineering. Had a promotion, but honestly, just kind of like a title change to executive vice president. So argue about whether or not that counts as a promotion. And then was promoted to CTO, I think a little over a year ago. So over 5 companies, I think that's 7 or arguably 6 promotions or so. So it's tricky. Like I always encourage people to reflect that in your LinkedIn, like show that career growth. But I've gotten feedback from recruiters of like, hey, that's a little bit too much. You actually don't want to appear as a climber. And so I just show like the title I had when I left that company at my LinkedIn, because I don't consider myself a career climber, and I don't want to accidentally send that signal to anyone, especially if I were to be looking for a job or something like that. So that's a little bit unique. But I've been very, I think, career focused in the sense I always had that insecurity to want to like make up for the fact that I didn't have the computer science degree and I was engineering. So I felt the need to go back and study and learn books to make up for that. And I always wanted to be very deliberate about my career moves, have a certain minimum length tenure. Even if I was unhappy at a company, I would force myself to stay and figure it out because I didn't want to appear to be job hopping, because I always wanted to make up for that kind of lack of credentials early on in my career.
Thanks. And I think that last piece about wanting to like read and study and continue to learn really like feeds into this next question. So I'd love if you could share what intentional steps you've taken throughout your career to get where you are today. And then maybe if there's a course or an experience or a conference that had a big development on your career, that had a big impact on your career development, if you could share that.
Sure. Yeah, I would say like, despite what I just mentioned about like really being conscious of the career that I was building to sort of, especially my early career, to kind of replace that lack of education, organized education. I wasn't really career focused at all. Like my focus was always getting results. That's the most important thing. And I wanted to make sure I was, I guess in the most general sense, like making my boss's life easier, making my peers' working lives easier, and the extent I was in managerial roles, making the working lives of the people that reported me better, creating an apolitical environment, for example, to the extent that can be achieved. And I think that's, career development is almost this meta separate thing from your career. And I think you can overdo focusing on it. It's certainly an art in its own right. You want to make sure you're not leaving anything on the table or skipping important steps. There's elements where you need to know when to advocate for yourself, and that can be uncomfortable for a lot of people. But for the most part, doing the job well is the 90% of what you should be focused on. And if you're not doing that, you don't have a lot of hope to get something out of a separate career development set of exercises. It is my personal kind of view. And at the same time, I think we've all met people who maybe got the promotion or got a big title and weren't actually really effective at the job. And so that's why I say, like, they're tightly coupled, but they're not technically the same thing. And when they get decoupled either way, either you can do the job and you get passed over for promotion, that's bad. Or if you get the promotion, you can't actually do it. That's bad as well. So you want to keep those two things as tightly coupled as you possibly can. But beyond just trying to get results and trying to have a relatively lengthy tenure at each one of these jobs. I mentioned I felt the need to go back and really kind of, like, when you're self-taught at anything, you kind of have holes, and that's something that organized education is meant to smooth you out, make you very uniform. So an example like that in computer science is like the big O notation, kind of a formalized way to express the time complexity of algorithms. That's not something you're going to independently derive if you're a self-taught programmer. So you kind of should be going back and reading some Robert Knuth books and whatnot, just so you can kind of be aware of those things and hang in a conversation with your peers who might have gotten that kind of formal education. So I did things like that to kind of fill in the formal computer science stuff. And I think a lot of us as managers are kind of like, I say, like, raised by wolves, almost like self-taught. There isn't a lot of structure or teaching that goes on for management skills. Even if you get like an MBA, that's really a finance degree. That's not a management degree in the sense of you're being taught how to manage people and teams and whatnot. There's a little bit of that, but it's mostly finance with a sidecar of other things like entrepreneurship or something. I think GitLab does a good job trying to provide some structure and guidance around that. And there's some great links in the handbook. But I think it's important to have a network of peers inside and outside the company you're talking to. At GitLab, we've got a couple of mentorship programs in engineering, like 7 CTOs and Plato HQ that you can take advantage of. It's very much kind of peer-to-peer learning, where you listen to other people's problems, what they're facing, lend your own ideas, learn from that, pose your own problems, get other people's kind of view into that. And that's especially important to have, outside your company and in it. And then, in the before times and hopefully the after times of the pandemic, attending conferences and getting out there and separating yourself from, like, getting out of the weeds. So the day-to-day, we're all really busy, and just hearing some kind of top-down presentations about management techniques and things like that is really, really important.
Thanks for sharing that. So when or how do you make time to work on your professional development in a normal week?
I guess in keeping with what I said earlier, where like the best form of professional development is just doing a good job at your job. I don't actually clear a lot of time for this, but there are some exceptions. Like when I was a senior director at my third company, it coincided with a lot of life stuff. So that was actually the first time I was working remote. This is very much an on-premise company based on the East Coast. I was given a special privilege to go remote, and it was a chance for me to move in with my now wife and follow her academic career around the country and get exposed to remote work and stuff like that. So when I was promoted to senior director, it actually coincided with moving out to San Francisco for the first time and being in a satellite office as opposed to remote or in the home office. And I actually downscoped my responsibilities at the time despite the promotion, and took the opportunity to be an individual contributor for part of the time. And so I got the chance to refresh my technical skills because I had been purely managerial for a number of years at that point. So I learned Node, server-side JavaScript, which is a new technology at the time. It's around like 2010, 2012 or so. And took personal ownership, became maintainer of a couple sites and applications that were important to the company. And got to kind of, it's a relatively rare opportunity once you go in engineering management to be able to go back and kind of learn to program again from a day-to-day basis and learn the new technologies and the new stack and whatever else has changed about it. And that's important because then you're managing engineers again, and you want to make sure you have empathy and understanding for how that has changed. So that, I guess, it wasn't like clearing a couple of hours in a week or something like that. That was a very deliberate kind of career decision that I made. It was one of the best things I ever did. And I wonder, ahead of me, I've kind of gotten back into that purely managerial mode since then. Over the course of a couple of companies. And I wonder, like, if there's time or when it will be the right time to maybe do that again, because it's been 8 years or so since I was like, coding 100% of the time for a job.
That's really great. Thanks for sharing that. It almost reminds me, not exactly, but kind of like the Internship for Learning program that we have at GitLab, which I haven't done, but just the idea of learning a skill by working directly with a team who is using the skill that you want to learn, it makes me think of like that as a similar opportunity that is something that we have for team members.
Yeah, and I that's a good thing, and I encourage people to look into that because we are, I'm a startup person, so I've primarily worked at smaller scale companies like the GitLab I joined, and we've grown it 10x since then. But one of the bad things about a startup, despite how much you learn, is there's never time to just say, "Oh, I'm going to go on a secondment for 6 months and do an internship or something like that." There's so much work to be done. You have to be super effective in your role and usually doing a couple of other things on the side until the company can scale. One of the nice things about GitLab getting to the scale we've gotten is where, there's many things that at a startup scale would be a single person. We've got whole teams around that stuff, which means that we should be able to support those kind of like lateral moves or temporary moves to invest in ourselves and each other and take advantage of it. It's never going to feel like it's the right time to do it because we're all super busy, but your former team or the team you'll return to will get by. And I think you'll rejoin that team with a whole new set of experiences and a new perspective on the problems being solved, and it'll be good for yourself and good for the company.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so this next question that we have is wondering what can managers and other individual contributors at GitLab do to assist their team members with their own career development and professional development goals?
Yeah, in the case of managers, it should be a must-have as opposed to a nice-to-have or something that they should do or they can do. I think they have to do this. Part of their job is to help get the most out of people, and that includes career development. There's many aspects of career development, self-improvement that don't result in raises or promotions, but it can be intrinsically motivating. And so I don't want to hand wave over that stuff. Not everything results in a title change, but we've got a fair amount of structure around this. So I think the first thing managers have to do is be aware of what they are in the position of representing the person and the company at the same time. So there's company need for different roles, more skills, whatever it might be. And then they've got to get that out of that person or help that person get them out of themselves. And you're always lining up the company need with the individual readiness. And if one of those things isn't there, it's really not the time to do any sort of promotion. You can force it, and that sometimes doesn't end particularly well. Someone loses face or leaves the company or has to be managed out or something like that. So really managers need to make sure they're creating a win-win scenario. Hopefully we've got all the skills and requirements for each role documented in the handbook in the form of a job family, including like performance indicators. Like ideally, there's a lot about what people need to do at their current level or their next level that can be measured and charted over time in the ideal sense. Not everything can be. There's plenty of like open-ended qualitative things we have to be good at, but anything that can be measured probably should be, because it just makes it so empirical and easy to focus on. So I think guiding people in those directions and creating those opportunities where, even if there isn't, let's say, an open managerial slot where someone can serve as interim, which we do very in a formal way in engineering. Let's say someone's ready for a managerial gig and we don't have a position open. Well, there's usually opportunities to do things along that axis of development, like manage a second project or manage a front-end team and a back-end person if you're a front-end manager or something like that. And so you can have these kind of lightweight ways to get exposure to these things. And then eventually with patience, that opportunity for a formal kind of interim or eventually promotion is going to open up and they can take advantage of that. ICs, they don't necessarily have that formal responsibility to do that. But I think it's certainly in line of our core values, like collaboration, to be helping others, making them better. Sometimes that does mean challenging people, but doing it nicely, doing it in a collaborative way where you have good intent and you're hoping to give that person feedback and get the most out of them, help them improve. The exception where it becomes formalized is like staff plus engineers, staff, principal, distinguished, eventually fellows. Part of that job role is to make whole collections of engineers more effective at their jobs, usually in the technical realms as opposed to in sort of the managerial realms. And so we do have expectations there about once you go beyond senior software engineer at GitLab that you're actively working to make the rest of your team better. In fact, that's where the word staff comes from. You're the senior most engineer on a staff, a collection of people, and you're there to be the senior most technical person and lead technical ideas and whatnot.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I love that the engineering department has those different levels and helping lead teams. So what do you think that team members can do to grow in their career or make career development a priority?
Yeah, I think try to make your manager's life easier, as I said. Same with your peers. To the extent you're in a RD managerial position looking to progress further, make sure your team is healthy and everybody's having a good time and you're getting results together. Try to do what your manager needs to do for you as well, which is be aware of the company's need. So you're not advocating for yourself when there really isn't a company need there. That can become sort of an awkward situation. It's important to be kind of like generally aware of your surroundings and the constraints and motivations of others. I think making sure, you understand what's documented in the job family, what your expectations are. If anything's confusing, try to get clarification there, including like do an MR, work handbook first, and propose like, hey, I see a gap here. I propose we fill it with this requirement. Work with your manager to fill that gap in. And I would say like there are times when it's important to advocate for yourself, because if you're not advocating for yourself, who is? And this holds a lot of people back. You can certainly overdo it. I know a lot of people are very cautious about seeming too overly ambitious or something like that, but you also don't want to underdo it as well. So, be transparent with your manager, and there's a nice, perfectly collaborative way to do it and say, hey, I am interested in doing this, and I would like every opportunity you can give me. Managers should be asking as well, because we know not everybody is going to advocate for themselves. And we've run into some great managers that didn't. We went and asked them, and turns out they did want that for themselves, but hadn't vocalized it. But that can come from either side. And so don't miss opportunities to advocate for yourself. Because everybody's busy, and you don't want to get accidentally overlooked. And I'm not typically worried about people at GitLab overdoing the ambition thing. Usually, people here are humble almost to the excess. So I think the general advice for most people is speak up for yourself. It's okay. That's particularly in one-on-one, which should be like a safe space. Those are the sort of quick list in my head that comes to mind.
Perfect. Thanks. I think that's really, really good advice for individual contributors here at GitLab. So I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to record this video on career development. Those were all the questions we had for you today, Eric. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Sure, anytime. And if people want to talk more about this or have follow-up questions, I've got office hours on my calendar every week. Perfect. My staff meeting is open to the company. People can come in there and ask questions too. So a number of ways to continue the conversation.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks, Eric.